on the burner. And we're now joined by Eli Letterman, covers Oklahoma State, joins us to talk with us on Sikkim 365 Radio. Eli, you've been there for like less than about a week or so with the Tulsa World covering Oklahoma State, but you've caught up as you are because you're good at what you do. What is and continues to be kind of the atmosphere in Stillwater on right now the Big 12 going forward, or what is the thought in Stillwater?
Guys, thank you so much for having me on. I'm excited to be on with you guys. And yeah, I'm entering week 2 on the Oklahoma State beat, so I'm fresh. But the feel up here, and it's kind of been the tone set by Mike Gundy, is that there's all you can do right now is guess. I don't think anybody beyond Oklahoma and Texas really know what the future holds. And so that's been the stance that's been maintained up here. They're not really letting it seep into this season, 2021, not knowing really what the future looks like. So the vibe here is that A, all we can do is guess, and B, that Oklahoma State, especially on the football field, has positioned itself to feel confident going into the future, whatever that looks like.
So how does he keep it out of the locker room? I'm curious for different coaches. How do you keep it out of the locker room? Even in it, like just for us on our show, just as a thought exercise, people jumping things around.
Of course. I mean, it's pretty hard to ignore, and you can probably take it with a grain of salt when Mike Gundy says he hadn't had a single player mention it to him. That might be hard to believe, but I would imagine that's just the tone as it's been set publicly, that's been set within the program, that there's nothing that's going to change likely, and it'll be news to all of us if it does in the next few weeks or even during this season. So I'd imagine that Mike Gundy and his staff have just set the tone of, look, we're not going to be able to, really have much control over this, so let's keep our eyes on the schedule and on this season and focus there and let everything else play out well above them.
So, Eli, the team's saying the right things. It's very similar to what Dave Aranda said about Baylor and their players. But in terms of the fan base, I mean, I think when this first broke, about 3 weeks ago, obviously the Oklahoma State side of things very personally affected by the fact that OU's involved in this. But as time has gone by now, and there's not exactly like the Big Ten coming calling or the Pac-12 coming calling just yet, is there a little bit of nervousness that's been, kind of more of a buzz of nervousness as the days have gone by?
I'm sure, and it's probably the same as all the Texas schools and seeing Texas go. There are nerves, and then I know you guys have Max Olson coming on, so he'll really fill everybody in, and I'll be tuned in to listen to that. Is you see, everything else flying around, and some of these schools in the Big 12, at least per reports, at the risk of getting left behind. So there are those nerves, I think. I also think it certainly helps, at least here in Stillwater, that there is confidence around the team in 2021, and maybe that's a bit of a distraction for now, particularly when there's really no headlines that are telling you where schools like Oklahoma State might be headed.
Where do you think, Eli, when you talk to those that or what are the expectations, and is right now the thought in Stillwater the same as it is in the other 7 cities, that patience is important, but my God, there's got to be some paranoia?
Oh, man. Well, I mean, guys, my guess is as good as anybody's. And I couldn't say where they might be headed or where any of these other schools might be headed. I think the proper way to approach it is with patience. And because the speculation, I think, can only ramp up the pressure on all these schools. And the fact is, I think unless you're at the very highest reaches of all this, and maybe in the boardrooms at ESPN or Fox or any of these conferences, we're all just guessing. And I know that's not the answer that everybody wants. We'd all love to know where things are going or for things to be red hot. But I think just the nature of it all, it's going to be quiet for a little while until it isn't.
Eli, how much concern is there? I mean, I know a lot of places never worry about money because they have, big time sugar daddies or donors to be kinder about it, but T. Boone Pickens passed away a couple years ago. He's no longer with us. How much does that concern Oklahoma State? And then he through his company and his foundation, has been able to keep Oklahoma State at pace with a lot of these facilities and other universities.
Of course. I mean, obviously, I'm just getting settled here, and so I couldn't tell you about the inner sanctum at Oklahoma State. But I think where they do feel confident is that they're maintaining success on the field. I mean, there's been few programs who have been more consistent in winning than Mike Gundy here in Stillwater over the last 15 years or so. and that certainly helps, whether it's confidence here and making money here, or remaining attractive to either attract people to a new look Big 12 or to head somewhere else, and then on down to some of the other programs here that, despite all the other things moving around them, that winning has kind of continued to happen here at Oklahoma State. And so I would point to that as probably the source of optimism and confidence headed into such choppy waters.
So 8-3 last year. Iowa State was a big win for Oklahoma State. Got the bowl win over Miami. Spencer Sanders is back. Defense looks good. I mean, there's obviously a lot of talk about Oklahoma and Iowa State, but what's kind of the buzz just about the actual team and the expectations for this year in Stillwater?
I think there's confidence. I think, as you said, there's probably Oklahoma State and Iowa State and then everybody else in terms of real contention. But I think Oklahoma State is right in that next tier and has as good a shot as anybody at maybe knocking on that door. You mentioned Spencer Sanders coming back. Everyone's going to point to whether he can hold on to the football, and if that's an improvement that he can make, then his talent speaks for itself. I think the most interesting factor with this team is the defense, because it's a rarity, but it was really the team's strength last year, and that's not something you see often with the Oklahoma State team, but it was the strength. And they return a bulk of that defense and a really experienced secondary, talented linebackers, and a lot of depth up front. And so that really might be, in the end, what determines the ceiling of this team is what can that defense do, and can it even make a jump from where it was last year?
Yeah, Oklahoma State has been good. They've won Big 12 titles, but is it one or two?
Like a tied.
Yeah. But and I know that Gundy has a cushion there, and obviously has been entrenched at Oklahoma State. Is there any kind of he's good enough to where we are every year that we have a shot, or is there anything where they're circling the wagons that they want more, and especially with what might happen with college football down the road?
Of course. I mean, I'm only speaking from a pretty shallow, overall knowledge base, given that I just arrived here. But I think, frankly, that if Mike Gundy was going to lose his job, it might have been last summer and all the events that went on off the field. But he recouped that. And then the other question just is, if Mike Gundy is in some world not the guy, who is Oklahoma State bringing to Stillwater that's going to do better than he's done over the last 17 years this fall, in terms of winning, because they've done a lot of it, and while they've maybe only broken through, that once or twice to really being there on that stage, and oftentimes the season kind of gets to the Bedlam game, and that's where it comes to an end. He's done a lot of winning, and I don't know that Oklahoma State can really do much better than the man they've got right now.
Eli, what's the kind of conversation like just around the state when it comes to Oklahoma and this move to the SEC?
I think it's quieted a bit. Obviously, at first it was such a shock, and there was the feelings of betrayal and all that. So it has quieted. But I think again, like it's the fact that there's probably not going to be a whole lot more movement during this coming football season. So maybe the focus is somehow onto just football, not what's going on off the field. But I'm certain that's the kind of stuff that'll intensify here and in Texas when Texas and OU get into those meetings with the conference and everyone else, and they try to wiggle out of this, prior to 2025, as everyone expects. I think that's where the animosity might come back up, and come October, November, we're going to start getting into a conference slate where these teams are playing the schools that want to leave. So I think we might be in a bit of a lull right now, whether it's in Oklahoma or Texas, but I have no doubt there will be some fireworks come the fall.
All right. Thank you very much, Eli. We appreciate it. Good luck with what you have with Oklahoma State, the Tulsa World, at By Eli Letterman, Lederman, who covers Oklahoma State, Sikkim 365 Radio.
Yeah, I mean, it's, for any of these schools, I think if you got an Iowa State writer on, which we did last week, or Texas Tech, which we've done, I mean, they're all kind of in the same holding pattern. I mean, same here in Waco, right? If you have had your initial thoughts and your initial reactions, and you're just kind of taking the news in and just seeing where it goes. But, like, as much as that report from Max comes out and everybody's like, oh, my God, like, what did it really change? like everything's the exact same that it was. So now it just, if anything, it just dumped gas on speculation. But in terms of actual movement or anything actually changing, nothing has changed since that report a couple of days ago. And it may not change for another 2 months. It may not change for a year. Like, that's the thing is, so much of this is just speculation and wondering. And like Eli said, it's like, hey, thank God there's a football season coming up to at least have some actual games to talk about. But I have no doubts that this will continue to swirl in and out week by week throughout the season. I mean, this is going to be a story all season long, and I don't know how much it'll actually impact games or the mindset of players. Like, I don't know that like Oklahoma State gets extra geared up for Oklahoma than they normally would this time around, but it's certainly going to be that kind of side story that just, is there the entire time this year. That's for sure.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to affect. There's not going to be many games it'll affect. I mean,
I said on Friday, why would it? Like, if you're RJ Sneed, who was asked about it, Baylor's senior receiver, he's like, we're not really talking about it. Why would you? He's not going to be affected by it. It doesn't matter to him. And for the freshmen, like, they have no idea. Like, why worry about, oh, my God, we're not going to be in the Big 12 after this year? Dude, you got to worry about this season first, because next year might not even matter at all if you don't play well this season. But then you might actually play in the Big 12 for the next 4 years. So what's the point in worrying about it? There's nothing that you can do to change anything as a player. So, if you're going to let it be a distraction, then that's just, a poor decision. There's no reason for it to be a distraction for anybody suiting up this year.
Yeah, there is. I mean, I think the only thing it'll affect is, when Oklahoma and Texas go on the road, like, people are going to boo the crap out of them. But guess what? That was happening anyway.
Yeah,
so, like, it might just be a more united, like, instead of booing them about disparate things throughout the crowd, it will be one thing, F you, you're leaving. Like, that's going to be the one thing people will boo them about. That's the only difference. I mean, united booing so far.
All right, one